Good morning, everyone. I'm just going to wait for you guys to trickle in. I've had a busy few working days. I've been at USCIS for hours, like the last few days. Good morning, good morning, good morning. I was at USCIS for like 4 hours last night. I said last night, yesterday morning. So that's why I wasn't on live. And last week too. So I've been on back to back to back USCIS interviews. And there's certain things that I noticed, that they really drilled down on that I kind of wanted to talk about today. So good morning, Shawnee, Hurl, Ike, good morning. 21 Shami, good morning. If this is your first time tuning in, welcome. Let me know where you're tuning in from. My name is Aisha Chidole, and I'm an immigration lawyer. I represent clients all over the United States with the immigration matters. At our firm, we handle family immigration, humanitarian-based cases, removal cases, so deportation defense, some bond hearings, and things like that. So to schedule a consult, you can give the office a call. It's 407-995-6567. Let me type the number in, and then we can get started. Maybe when I finish the live and I post this, I'm going to put a thing where if you type in interview, you'll be able to get my interview guide, which I probably need to even modify some more just based on what it is that I'm seeing. Okay, so let me pin this number real quick and then we can get started. I guess, hold on, let me save this. Okay, so pinned. Okay, so what are some trends that I've noticed? So the first one, which, oh yeah, let me put this down because I don't want to forget this. Those who had interview waivers. So the first one that I've noticed is for those who are filing for removal of conditions on their conditional green card, meaning they're submitting an I-751 form, they are being, if you had an interview waiver, meaning when you got your green card, you never got a marriage interview, they are being extremely tough in those interviews. Like, down to the officers saying that, well, first of all, this is the problem, with them not doing marriage interviews and just waiving it. And, we will be reviewing your application to make sure that it wasn't even a mistake giving you your 2-year green card in the first place. So not only are they looking at good faith now, they're looking at the original filing to see that it wasn't in error that they even approved you for your 2-year green card, right? So if you are someone who got a waiver, now you're trying to do an I-751, you better have your stuff together. You better be using an attorney. You better make sure that you've dotted your I's, crossed your T's. You better bring your old file. If you didn't use an attorney for your old filing and you have a copy of it, you better bring it to review it to make sure there's nothing contrary to anything that you're adding in your application, and you can actually document timelines that make sense. The timelines are so critical, right? So that's number one. The second thing that they're focusing on, in the interviews is how long did you date before you got married? That is not a question that, I've seen at the level at which they've hammered it over the last few days. Before it's like, oh, tell us how you met, when you get engaged or whatever it is. Like, I've had to step in, for a client to say, in one of these interviews, where the officer was like, who marries someone after meeting that person for such a short time, where, I had to say, well, we have shows like Love is Blind. What is the other one called? Married at First Sight. Like, people can fall in love, like, really quickly and spontaneously. I mean, for crying out loud, didn't Portia and Simon Gubadia get engaged in 2 weeks? But, I'm saying that, as a defense to my client. But the thing is, you really, really need to think about that. So for those of you who rush into marriage, it's not to say that people do not fall in love and marry on time, but you better make sure it makes logical sense, that it makes logical sense that you married someone that short of a time, because they try to connect the dots. They're asking about how long you dated. They want to know what your visa status was when you chose to get married. Were you out of status by then? Were you in status then? Because what they're trying to see is they're giving you a bait to take it to see if you married this person for the purposes of immigration, which you should never do. But you have to make sure you are prepared to answer that question. The little question that is big that they've been asking now is, of course, we know that if you file a marriage-based case to a U.S. citizen, they would usually forgive you for overstaying. But what they're asking or framing it in a way that could entrap you, if you don't understand the question, to basically insinuate immigrant intent and misrepresentation at the time you entered into the United States. Who's this person? Delete. 1 second, guys. This person is saying that I'm not a real person, I'm an actor. That's funny. Okay, so as I was saying, just give me a second to this. Okay, so as I was saying, they're asking you, why did you overstay? Why did you overstay? Did you intend to overstay when you came here? Did you purchase a returning ticket when you came here? So something that I know for us, we will even be encouraging now with our clients when we're submitting it to prove that they never intended to overstay is that where there is a return ticket of whatever trip, it depends on how long ago they came. But if they have access to that, we want to include that to show that the plan was never to be here permanently. Yes, things happen. You come to a new country, different things happen, and you say, okay, I'm going to stay here. But if you have your return ticket, it is a good idea to document and hold on to that or include that in your application so that, should that question come up or should that concern come up, that USCIS has that, right, in the file, so that they're able to, see that you were never intending to stay. And then was this one more, which I've forgotten now. So I talked about the interview waivers. Those of you who had the initial interview waivers, really just prepare for like a double interview of just rigor. The second group is, how long you've dated. You really need to be able to know how long you've dated and understanding that that's from when you and that person became boyfriend and girlfriend. Sometimes some people, there's a blurred line between when they've dated, we were friends, and then we kind of just organically morphed into a relationship, and then we chose to get married. Whatever it is, you want to make sure that you're able to articulate, meaning you're able to say it in a way that is understandable to anyone that is listening to it. I know that sometimes when immigrants get into these interviews, they're very nervous, and they misspeak. I see it happening. And, I know that officers sometimes get upset at me when I try to interject or correct the record if my client is saying something based on nerves that I know is not accurate. And I have to say, no, officer, like, I'm trying not to interject, but clearly my client is so visibly nervous that they're not even, like, the documents are there to show that this is the information, but they're so nervous that they're hyperventilating or giving the opposite information, so it's very, 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 very important, guys, that you are prepared for those interviews. You're prepared to answer the question of why you overstayed in the United States. You're prepared to answer the question of how long you were married to how long you were dating your spouse before you guys got married. And also just to know that if you got an interview waiver in the first place, that they're going to be reviewing that file to ask themselves, well, why did they even approve that in the first place without an interview? Before interview waivers, for those of you who have been following me a long time, you attest to the fact that I've always said, for most people, the interview is where most people fail. Because, you can have a lawyer that helps you organize your application, puts it in chronological order, your packets, your evidence correctly. But at the end of the day, your presentation or your interview is what is going to determine whether everything makes sense together and fits in a puzzle, or whether you're going to unravel or dismantle it. And that is why, interview, you need to prepare for your interview as you would a job interview. It's like if you're going to do the biggest presentation of your life, you can put together a PowerPoint presentation, but if you don't know if you're not prepared to show page X on the PowerPoint or explain why you wrote this in page X, when people are asking the questions, you're not going to be able to be successful in the pitch. So it's the same way. So those are some trends I've noticed that you guys should definitely be mindful of those. Let me take some questions. Orain says, good morning. I need help. Definitely give me a call. My number's on the ticker right there on Facebook, and schedule a consultation. You can have a consultation with either me or any of the attorneys that do consultation at my firm. We're all able to consult and assess your case. Okay, and then someone is asking, is the pause affecting the green card process of the work permit and travel documents too? The pause affects the green card, not the green card process, but it affects the approval of the green card and the work permit. That said, we are seeing some trickle of some responses in terms of at the decision stage for some people in those countries. But I do not want to say emphatically whether they've removed it or not, because there's no announcement that they've removed it, until I physically see a green card post-dated after the date of the initial pause. I can't tell you, but we are seeing them adjudicate to the level of a request for additional evidence or a notice of intent to deny based on the people in this country. So they are continuing with the process up until that point. But until I physically see a card or a green approval letter for one of those countries, I don't want to tell you that the pause, that it seems that they've quietly removed it, but I can tell you that they are definitely reviewing it and sending us inquiries and making decisions. Even also, I know there was somebody from, I don't know what country now, but one of the countries with the pause, I think it was Nigeria, that asked, even for the prima facies, as you can see, that's why I like to post like flags when we receive results. So you can find your flag there and just kind of see what process. As you can see, if you're from Nigeria or any of the other pause countries, you're still getting prima facies. If you're eligible for prima facies, they just stop at the decision. And something one of the officers told me yesterday, because I was asking her, I was saying, obviously I know there's this pause, but we're also seeing they're slow. And she's like, yeah, before, like in an interview, she could just like approve a decision, but now she just has to be very, very thorough, like re-review, because they themselves, USCIS officers, don't want to get in trouble as well. So they have to go in extra caution with every line, like, before this pause or this pause to create like extra scrutiny. They wanted to, like if you go to an interview and they say, oh, we would recommend you for approval or whatever it is, which is why even if they say they would recommend you for approval, it's very rare. Like, I haven't seen that approval happen on that same day. Like even if they say, oh, we're going to approve you, it hasn't happened on that same day. It could be like a few days later, or whatever it is, but they are being extremely cautious because that's the directives that they've been given, so that there's no, kind of error mistake there. Okay. Okay, someone is asking, what do you mean by waiver for the first filing? What I mean is that if you filed a marriage-based case sometime between 2022 and 2024, maybe even late 2021, some people, if you had enough visual evidence that you had a genuine marriage, or that it is more likely true than not that your marriage is genuine, you would be they would have waived you for an interview, right? They waived you for an interview. So meaning you didn't do an interview. Before that, before the previous administration, there was no time in my practice I had ever like experienced interview waivers. It was just in the last administration, because everybody would go to an interview if you're a marriage-based case, right? But now for those people who had interview waivers, what they're doing when you file your I-751, which is your removal of condition application, is that they are rechecking that first application. When I mean rechecking, like they're asking questions related to that form and answering, and this officer last week said, just so you know, I already know what the answers are. I can see them here, but I'm just asking you again, just to make sure, that we didn't approve you by mistake, or whatever. So they're checking post green card and pre green card stuff. So, you definitely want to be mindful about that. Charm said, if you don't file taxes with your husband this year and you have a conditional green card, what happens? Not filing taxes doesn't outrightly get someone denied. What USCIS looks at is a total amount of evidence. If you're not filing taxes and you have a reason for not filing taxes and have other supporting evidence to show why this is a genuine marriage, that usually is enough. So one thing doesn't disqualify you, but you have to have a combination of things to prove that your marriage is genuine. For those of you who, you've been married since like 2024 or something like that, which puts you at almost about 2 years, and you don't have any kind of evidence of your marriage, you don't have any pictures, you don't have any things in your name, you don't have any emails going on, honestly, you're going to be put through the ringer. So you better make sure that you have evidence. Like basically, before I would say that the approach was, we give us something, like we want to approve you. We want to approve you. Unless there's something else, we would approve you. Now the approach is, we want to deny you. Why did you want to overstay? Why did you overstay here? Why didn't you go back to your country? Why didn't you file that? That's literally how the interviews are going. So now you really want to make sure that you're documenting stuff. And I want to specifically call out applicants who don't have a good reason for not living with their spouses. If you don't have a good reason for not living with your spouse, you guys live in the same state, same city, 30 minutes away from each other, 40 minutes away from each other, where reason doesn't make logical sense, you're basically asking to be denied. You're basically asking to be receive a notice of intent to deny, or whatever it is. That's basically what you're asking for. So you really, really, really need to make sure that if you are married and it's a genuine marriage, that you're doing what you need to do to prove it is a genuine marriage. Okay. My VAWA is 3 years and 10 months. What's going on? I'm one of those countries that has their case on hold. What are we going to do? Nothing. You just wait for them to make a decision. As I told you, we're seeing some trickle. So I feel hopeful that we're going to get some stuff, in the next couple of weeks. But again, I don't know. I don't want to make a prediction, or you guys say, oh, Aisha said this, but they will lift the adjudicative hold once they finish giving them the instructions, and then we'll let you know. Why are VAWA cases taking so long nowadays? I remember it used to be 26 months. Your guess is as good as mine. I think part of the reason, apart from the fact that VAWA applications are incredibly dense, like they're much bigger than most applications. Well, that's just the general humanitarian cases. They've also seen an uptick in VAWA applications, in the last few years, which is the reason why they have created stricter guidelines for VAWA. For instance, if you're filing for VAWA, and before you could show that you lived with a person before you got married, but now it must be after you got married, right? And so now they're really deep diving into, your declaration, your personal statement, what is the motivation behind the person abusing. Like, one of the things that is really important to include in your personal statement is what you believe the motivation as to why someone was doing something to you is. For instance, if you're saying that, every time like I would get ready to go to the gym, that's when my spouse wanted to pick a fight with me, wanted to stop me from going to the gym, or whatever it is, it's no longer enough to just kind of stop there. You want to be able to explain the motivation behind that. And the motivation behind that would be, i.e., jealousy, i.e., my spouse doesn't want me to look good because my spouse is controlling, and my spouse feels that if other people see me, they'll be attracted to me, and they believe I'm going to cheat because maybe they're insecure or whatever it is. But basically, your puzzle needs to fit. Like, no longer can you just basically, they want you to give them the conclusion of why this is happening, or whatever the case may be, or whatever it is. And if you are someone who a lot of your abuse is not physical, and I've said this a few times, if your abuse is not physical, you've never been to the doctor for anything, you never have pictures to document it, and what you're really alleging is psychological, emotional, you really, 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 really want to try and get a psychological evaluation. Now, if you submit it, are they going to outrightly deny you without a psychological evaluation? No, but without much more evidence other than your word, fully expect a request for additional evidence. Sometimes we submit for a client without once we receive it, we'll then supplement your application, amend your application. Yes. And so I also want to talk to another group based on the trend I'm seeing as well. And this is something I asked the officer, when you apply for your case and your case is denied, and then all of a sudden that's when you want to call a lawyer. It doesn't really matter what a lawyer files, they will still place you in removal proceedings. Now, are there options for you in removal proceedings if you're eligible for something? Sure, yeah. There are options for you, if you are in removal proceedings, if you're already eligible for those things. But filing doesn't, or lack thereof, does not avoid that. This is literally what the officer told me. Because I specifically asked her. And the reason why I asked her is, I had an interview yesterday where the client came to us after they had used someone that pretended to be a lawyer, and that person ended up not being a lawyer, and that person did not file their one of the forms needed for their marriage-based form, right? That was critical. Even though the client knew something was off, but the person insisted that, it's fine, I filed it without it. They submitted it. They sent a request for evidence. The request for evidence, they didn't provide it to the clients until basically to the deadline. So that case was denied. We submitted a brand new case based on the calculation of appeal window. They missed the appeal window or whatever it is. So even though we submitted a brand new case in August, that client was placed in removal proceeding, right? That client was placed in removal proceeding in November. So it really didn't matter whether or not we submitted it. And, even USCIS officers don't like it, because they feel like it's a waste of resources, right? So even though we went there yesterday, with the client yesterday, and I said, well, obviously you guys don't have jurisdiction of the 485 anymore since you guys have placed this client in removal. But if you can approve the I-130, then we can go to the judge and ask them to terminate this case. That's the removal case, so that they can finish up the 485 at USCIS. Because basically what my goal was to basically beg her to administratively close the case so my clients don't have to pay a new filing fee, because I'm always thinking about ways my clients don't have to pay more money. But the point is, that really sucked, for that client. Thank God they found us, or whatever it is. And we will get it to the finish line. They will get their green card, and they'll probably come and give a testimony about that. But the point is, if you are dilly-dallying and trying to file, and I can't tell you, how many consults I have in the same situation. They come to us and say, yeah, I filed it myself. I know I shouldn't have filed it myself, or whatever it is, because I thought it was straightforward. It's that, understand that even though we can fix it, once you're placed in removal or once you've come with a denial, we can't fix everything, depending on what the issue is. Like if you have like some crazy misrepresentation or like, marriage fraud, we can't fix those, like, and stuff like that. But the point is, it's going to cost you more in money, more in peace, more in time, because now you're coming to us with something that's really messed up. Right. So now we're attacking it in USCIS. We're attacking it with the immigration judge. We're dealing with waivers. We're dealing with appeals. So when you want to do it right the first time. If you know that you cannot do it right the first time, don't do it. Just don't do it. Does that, are you still safe? No, of course, unless you plan to just lock yourself in your room for the rest of your life. I would say to everyone who comes here on a tourist visa, like, what do you think the reason why they didn't ask y'all to, when they said everybody should register, and they said, well, if you came with a tourist visa or certain visa, we don't need you to register. We already have your information. They have your information. If they wanted to pick you up today, they're going to pick you up today. But it's basically an order of priority of who they want to get or not get. So get your stuff together. So yeah, that's basically it. And those are the trends that I've noticed. I'm sorry I can't take too much questions today. I got to jump off. Let me see if I can stay for a few. No, I can't. I got to jump off. I hope you guys have a great day. As always, schedule a consultation if you want to talk about your specific case, or you have something you want to find out if you're eligible for something. And when I finish, I'll put the thing for you to put interview so that you can get like my interview checklist. I can't promise I'm going to have time to amend it because I am very busy, but if I do, I'll amend it, and but otherwise, save this video as to what you can expect, at your next interview. All right, guys, have a great day. Bye.